Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Maureen Wilson, proud Ward 1 Hamilton City Councillor. An honor to serve you. Thanks for joining us tonight. Before we begin getting into the meeting and its purpose, I'm going to read out a land acknowledgement. The City of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the City of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. So welcome one and all. This evening is the Breadalbane or Breadalbane Bicycle Boulevard pilot project. I have an agenda. We have an agenda. It's before you right now. It's the roadmap. I'm going to introduce who is joining us from the staff end of things, and then we'll get right into it. You're in good hands and lucky hands, because I will not be speaking all that much tonight. As someone reminded me, every minute I speak is one less minute for the public. Joining us tonight from the City of Hamilton's Sustainable Transportation Division is Peter Topolovic, Program Manager, and Trevor Jenkins. Welcome. From the city's Transportation Operations Maintenance Division within Public Works is Mike Fields, who is the Acting Director, Mushfiq Rahman, the Senior Project Manager of Transportation Engineering, and Becker Fahad, the Project Manager of Pedestrian and Cycling Engineering. Also joining us from the IBI group is Zibby Petch. She is the Manager of Active Transportation.
Good evening, everyone. I'll be walking you through the proposed changes along Breadalbane before we open it up to questions. Our project limits for this study include Breadalbane, a little section of Jones, as well as Woodbine between King Street and York Boulevard. These are primarily low-speed, low-volume streets, but we feel that there's an opportunity through some design changes to enhance this area for people walking and cycling while supporting community objectives. From a cycling perspective, this is an important link as cyclists regularly use this corridor to connect to and from the York or King Street cycling facilities. And particularly since the eastbound facilities along King end at Breadalbane, many cyclists use Breadalbane to connect to Hunt or Baker, or even Sunset to continue further east. So why are we proposing a bicycle boulevard along this corridor? This is really in response to concerns from residents about speeding and cut-through traffic along Breadalbane. We see an opportunity to tie together improvements aimed at managing vehicular speed and volume. This will also help us create an attractive, all ages and abilities cycling route. And I'll note that bicycle boulevards are also identified as part of the city's COVID-19 recovery mobility plan. So our project objectives include expanding the citywide cycling network with connections to existing east-west cycling facilities on King and York, enhancing corridor safety and livability by calming vehicular traffic volumes and speeds, as well as incorporating beautification, and using a pilot project approach with rapid implementation to grow our understanding of bicycle boulevards and how they work in Hamilton, and to test new design elements. So what exactly are bicycle boulevards? These are not the same as other forms of cycling infrastructure you may have seen around the cities, such as bike lanes. They do not provide dedicated space for cyclists. Instead, vehicle speeds and volumes are controlled to help create a safe and welcoming street for both pedestrians and cyclists, with cyclists sharing the road with vehicles. These are slow speed, low volume streets that incorporate various treatments depending on operating conditions. You may have also heard these referred to as slow streets or neighborhood greenways in other cities. So I mentioned the range of treatments that may be considered along a bicycle boulevard. Typically, they will always include the first two levels here, signage and pavement markings. These help guide users along the corridor, consisting of wayfinding, directional markers, and bike route signs. And depending on the specific conditions within each block, other elements including intersection treatments and speed management or traffic diversion may also be considered. These images should give you a better sense of how bicycle boulevards look and feel. You'll see the use of wayfinding directional markers, signage, and examples of traffic diversion, which help to prevent cut-through traffic. So let's walk through the proposed changes along this corridor to give you more detail on how these treatments are proposed to be specifically applied. So these images illustrate examples of the types of treatments being proposed through this project. The top left shows directional wayfinding markings that help guide cyclists along a corridor. Then we have signage that identifies the route as a bicycle boulevard. We also are proposing some curb extensions that help to narrow the road, typically around intersections, to reduce and control vehicle speeds. At the bottom right, we see an example of what we call a modified or realigned intersection. These are used at T intersections and they help slow vehicles through the intersection and enhance pedestrian safety. Then we see traffic circles, which can be used to enhance the public realm, but also help to slow turning vehicles through intersections. And finally, directional diverters, which are applied to restrict vehicular movements in a particular direction while maintaining access for pedestrians and cyclists. And these are generally used to help discourage cut-through traffic. So this project is proposed to be implemented as a pilot project with an opportunity to test the design and adapt it over time. Materials may vary from simple, quickly installed materials to more robust long-term materials, giving an opportunity to test performance. And an important element of bicycle boulevards are greening and public realm enhancements, including plantings and decorative elements that would likely be added over time. So what does this look like for a typical section of Breadalbane? Outside of intersections, the corridor will remain much as it is today. Currently, there's parking on one side with two-way vehicular traffic, and this will remain exactly the same along most of the corridor, just with the addition of the pavement markings and signage for cyclists. Parking is generally not proposed to be removed mid-block. So now we'll walk through the various improvements with this plan view, and you'll be able to get a better sense of some of those intersection-specific treatments. So to orient you as I work my way north along the corridor, here you'll see King Street to the left of the screen, and we're looking north at the right of the screen. So we're looking at the most southerly block of Breadalbane, starting from King Street and moving our way north. So the first intervention you'll see that we're proposing is a curb extension right at the entrance to the Cathedral Road, and that will help to control turning vehicle speeds. Then at Hunt Street, you'll see that we are proposing a traffic diverter that will restrict the southbound movement for vehicles. Part of the reason that we're considering this treatment along the bike boulevard is that we suspect many vehicles are using Hunt and Breadalbane to avoid the King and Dunder intersection. So introducing this feature will help to reduce vehicle cut-through traffic along Hunt, Baker, and Breadalbane. Just to show you what that will look like. So obviously we have many residents, I'm sure you're aware, this section of road is currently no entry during afternoon weekday peak periods. And so that would become a permanent restriction, although obviously pedestrians and cyclists would still be permitted to make that movement. So the current left turn, through, and right turn movements that you see here would not be possible by vehicles. And this is really an effort to discourage cut-through traffic. With this change, we would lose about one parking space along this block for the length of the diverter, but we do have some parking utilization counts that suggest relatively low usage for this block. Moving north along Breadalbane, in addition to the pavement markings and signage that we show throughout, that's the green feature you see, we are proposing to add some speed management features right at the Baker Street intersection, including curb extensions or chokers designed to narrow the traffic lane and reduce speeds. Because these features are being proposed directly at the intersection where parking is not permitted, there is no anticipated impact to parking supply from these features. We're also proposing a few curb extensions on the east side of the street, again, to control the speed of turning traffic. Moving north along Breadalbane to Lochern and Tom, In addition to pavement markings and signage, we're proposing to add a traffic circle at the intersection of Lochern, so you can see an example here, and a realigned modified intersection at Tom Street. Both of these elements will help to slow vehicles through the intersection without impacting parking supply. And finally, our last section of the corridor, this is where we have our little jog along Jones and down Woodbine. In addition to the pavement markings and signage, again, we're just proposing a curb extension right at the intersection of Jones and Breadalbane. And I will note that there are future improvements planned to the intersection of York and Woodbine through a separate project along York Boulevard. And with that, I will turn it back to Trevor to talk about project timelines and next steps.
So thank you, Zibby. So in terms of where we are right now with this project, we are in what we call the preliminary design stage. So this is where we have the general idea of what we'd like to be able to do, but we want to be able to meet with you, the residents and future users, to answer your questions, get your feedback and incorporate it into the design. Moving forward, what we would be looking towards is doing more detailed design throughout 2021 and looking towards launching this pilot in 2022. As noted on the screen, the design concept is subject to refinement through consultation, further analysis, and detailed design, which is why we want to get your feedback and comments to make sure we can understand what the community's views are. So as I mentioned, we do want to hear from you. So at the bottom there, we have set up a comment form where you can submit your feedback. It's available at hamilton.ca/newlanes. So this is the page where all the information on current cycling projects in the city are available. You can also submit your comments directly to us via email at sustainable.mobility@hamilton.ca. So I've received a number of comments from folks already that I believe I responded to almost everyone as of noon today. So please share your comments and we like that feedback. We also ask that you submit your comments by Friday, October 8th, which is just a little bit over from 2 weeks from now. After October 8th, we'll review all the comments and we'll take the input and start to refine the design. From there, we'll move into detailed design and finalizing design throughout the rest of 2021 and early 22. And then after that, we'll be moving towards that pilot implementation next year, as well as doing ongoing monitoring and adaptation over time.
Thanks, Trevor.
Yep.
I'll start with our first question from Cameron. Is this meant to replace the Dunder and bike lanes?
So I can start and maybe Zibby can chime in afterwards. So this project isn't intended to replace the Dunder and bike lanes, it's more meant to complement it. So as part of the last cycling master plan review and update, Breadalbane was identified as an important link for connecting King and York, as well as to kind of head and hunt in the crossings that are popular there. So this is really more meant to provide a opportunity to create an all ages and abilities cycling link. Part of the reason with that is, as you probably are aware, as you're going from King up to York, there is a bit of a climb up the hill, and Dunder is a busier street. So this is more meant to provide that opportunity for a lower connection, more comfortable street where cyclists can be comfortable. Zibby, I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to add into there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good summary. I'll just quickly say, obviously, the city is continuing to try to expand their network of all ages and abilities cycling facilities. So we know that with a corridor like Dunder, that's higher speed, higher volume. It would take more like a protected bike lane to fit that category. Whereas with Breadalbane, knowing what we can do in terms of controlling speeds and volume along this corridor, we see that as a really great AAA cycling facility in the future.
Thank you. From Teresa, how will parking along the proposed route be impacted?
So from our analysis and preliminary design, the only loss of parking we expect is one parking spot between Hunt and King Street for the traffic diverter. Everywhere else, we're just formalizing, we're not losing any legal parking spots. So all the parking that's available today, either on Breadalbane or the side streets, will remain there.
Thank you. Great. From Christine, she apologizes if she missed it, but can you still turn on to Breadalbane from King Street and drive all the way to the end? So if you came onto King, could you drive up northbound?
Yep. Zibby, can I just get you to go back to that slide? Oh, perfect. Yep. So the traffic diverter. So yeah, what you're describing, Christine, about turning from King onto Breadalbane. Yep, you can still make that movement. it would just be the other direction. So you couldn't come, from York Boulevard down Breadalbane to King. That would be closed off at Hunt Street. Really meant to kind of deter people who are cutting through to avoid that Dunder and King intersection. But traveling from King Street towards York Boulevard in that direction will still be fully permitted.
From James, can the prohibition of traffic onto King from Breadalbane be reconsidered?
So this is an interesting question. So one of the things we found with some of our early conversations was that there was a large amount of cut-through traffic coming from folks who are trying to avoid that Dunder and King intersection, particularly because, in non-COVID times, it does tend to get backed up. We have compared some pre-COVID traffic counts to post-COVID traffic counts, and it looks like there has been about drop of about 250 vehicles per day kind of taking that direction. So it does seem that there is cut-through traffic coming through. We think this traffic diverter offers an interesting opportunity to be able to test to see if that reduction is still happening. As you're probably aware, there is that peak period restriction already in place there. However, it doesn't seem to be, not everyone's respecting it as they should, which is a challenge. So, there has been concerns, there have been comments from the community before, which is why we're trying to look towards a more permanent solution or test out a more permanent solution there, just to see how it would work out.
Is there any risk to removing more on-street parking than was discussed today? Parking is already tight on Tom and Jones, and his support for the project depends on whether the current on-street parking is maintained.
So I can start, and then maybe Zibby, if you want to join me or anyone else. From our analysis right now, we did do parking surveys, and we fully recognize that parking is at a very much of a premium in this neighborhood. Many of your residents and local community households don't have access to a driveway, so on-street parking is a necessity, which is why we tried to limit any sort of extensions or features to avoid any impacts. We don't foresee any additional impacts coming through. If there was a change, then we would probably come back. But as of right now, everything that we're proposing can be done within the space where parking is not legally allowed today.
How will this impact snow removal?
It won't impact snow removal. We will make any adjustments to the snow removal program based on what elements we would construct on Breadalbane.
Is there potential to better improve the Breadalbane-Jones intersection?
So, and this one's a bit of an interesting one. I'll start, and Zibby, you can add in. Because it is that bit of an offset, it does operate as two separate intersections. So we try to avoid trying to combine that into one operation, just because you wouldn't have sight lines available for the different opposing traffic. We are looking towards the improvement of having that tighter turning radii there in order to slow down some of those vehicles coming down. Zibby, maybe do you have any additional comments there?
No, I mean, I'd be interested for whoever provided that comment, if you want to provide any, suggestions or comments about some of the challenges that you are experiencing at that location. It's something we could always take back and give a little bit of thought to. We did think about things like having a similar realigned or modified intersection at this location, but with the driveway placements across from the intersection, it's a little bit tricky, but certainly would be interested to hear any community suggestions or input.
Thanks, Abby. From Mark, is there plans for westbound to York from Woodbine?
Yep. So I'll start this question, then hand it over to Peter Topolovic to add any additional comments. So from my understanding of the question, you're asking if from the westbound cyclists on York to be able to access Woodbine. So in the interim, the answer would be that cyclists would have to turn left at Dunder and then enter through Jones. There is a longer term project, as I think you mentioned, Zibby has highlighted there, to do improvements there to actually provide that direct connection. I'm not sure if Peter wants to talk a bit more about that York and Dunder project.
Thanks, Trevor. So this project at York and Dunder is planned for future works in the mid-2025 range. And we would come back for more public consultation on this one and work with Mike Field's group as well, as there's a potential to realign the intersection and perhaps provide direct access to Woodbine from York and Dunder. And there have been some planning exercises that have happened previously that sort of show the different ways we can do that, but I think more work will have to happen on the intersection. I don't know if Mike wants to add to that, but it's certainly on the table, and we will be coming back. There's no feasibility study for that yet, and that road works itself have not yet been planned, but the idea would be that there's lots of potential for making changes to that intersection in the what I would call the near future.
Will this include road remediations?
Thanks. Not at this moment do we have plans for directly associated with this project to do any resurfacing, that sort of thing. But I know the councillor might have other plans in the future.
Why are you doing all this when this route works fine for bikes and cars?
So I can start that question. So the Transportation Master Plan set out a vision for how we're going to keep moving into the future, looking towards 2031 and beyond. And similarly, the official plan set a plan for growth. And one thing both of them found is that we really need to start finding other ways to help people move, be able to get around in order to have really a transportation system that works for everyone and to support the growth. As you're probably familiar with, the city did declare a climate emergency, which does support the push or the move towards really trying to create opportunities for others to get around. And we really see this as a great connecting link because really Breadalbane is a very important link between King and York, providing good access over to the King Street bike lanes to get to McMaster and to downtown and the communities in between. Hand it over to maybe Peter if you want to add in some additional comments about.
I just wanted to add to that Council has unanimously supported principles of Vision Zero, which require us to look out for the best interests of vulnerable road users, which are pedestrians and cyclists as well. So this project is in alignment with the goals and objectives of the Vision Zero commitment.
I was also going to say that this adds to creating a very balanced street as well. So without compromising the on-street parking and allowing a similar throughput for local cars, people who do live in the neighborhood, we also increase the sort of the capacity for pedestrians and cyclists to use this as a more preferred route and a safer route. So this bringing in a really complete streets look and focus to the street and the area.
Thank you. It's Maureen Wilson, Councillor. All of those comments, in addition to, we know that 22% of Ward 1 residents do not have a car. They do not own a car. And so as a councillor, I'm also accountable to those residents, but also the policies that the city has put out. And part of that is equity, making sure that we share our most expensive and largest public asset, and that's our streets. Secondly, the city has declared a climate emergency, and we know the private automobile is one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gases. So if we're going to be encouraging people to take responsibility, I think the onus is on us as a city to ensure that we have safe options for you if you want to switch up, not use a cycle all the time or not walk all the time, but at least provide safer options. And the third piece is that one of the issues that the Ward 1 office deals with probably most frequently are concerns from all residents about the safety of their streets. A lot of concerns about fast-moving traffic, rat running. It's another way to say people who are using your street through your neighborhood on their commute somewhere else. And so they don't really take that much ownership of your safety. And so if we want to really address those concerns, it means we have to fundamentally look at sometimes the design of our streets. So we discourage that kind of unsafe behavior. So for all those reasons and the eloquent ones that the staff members set out, that's why we're pursuing this.
Are they going to make Woodbine one way for cars?
So as part of this proposal, no, we intend to keep Woodbine as a two-way street for vehicles. If there are feedback or comments about that, we'd be interested to hear about them. But as proposed here, there would just be some additional signage and pavement markings for cyclists.
What is the duration of the pilot? What are the metrics of success?
Yep. So we have developed a kind of what we call the evaluation framework for monitoring the success of this, which will include some of the data we've already collected around traffic volumes, speeds, and complaints along the community. We also, for a pilot like this, we typically launch a community survey before, partway through, and before this it goes in, 6 months in, a year, and then 2 years after, to get the community's input and understanding, to get their views and assess them on different areas, for users as well as residents and property owners to understand their opinions and views, as well as if there were changes we had to make throughout the process, making sure we keep track of those and understand those as well.
Could the stop signs be converted to yield signs? Cyclists already race through the signs at Loch Hearn every day. So how will this road also, how will the cyclists yield to the pedestrians and the rest of the folks trying to get through on the street?
So maybe I can start, and maybe Mike Othermish can speak in about converting stoplight signs to yield signs first.
Sure, yeah. Our preference is to use stop controls for intersections and avoid using yield signs. We only try to use yield signs in certain circumstances. In intersections like this, we wouldn't depart from using all-way or stop controls.
Yeah.
So I do believe this is where the traffic circle is. This is Loch Hearn and
sorry. Yep. In that case, they would become yield signs. I think the stop signs are showing the existing ones that are there today. Sorry about that.
Kara. She's concerned that the bikes don't stop at stop signs, but she would also like to know about enforcement and and when Jones will be repaved. Separate question, but how is enforcement used in these situations, and why is that not the successful way to deal with these situations?
In terms of enforcement of cyclists or vehicles stopping at stop signs?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, that's part of Hamilton Police Services kind of role. So as a city, we will ask them to help enforce certain areas of the city upon request that we think that there needs to be additional enforcement. But otherwise, they kind of look at and plan out their enforcement activities across the city. Bicycles are considered vehicles under the Highway Traffic Act and are required to follow all traffic laws that vehicles are required to follow as well.
Yeah, I will only kind of add into that as some of these intersection modifications we're proposing, while they will help to slow down automobile traffic, they do also require cyclists to be able to respond. Right now it is, for lack of a better term, a straight shoot down, but this will require them to be able to, be more alert, be able to navigate around some of these changes as well. So it's not just automobiles that we're hoping to manage, but also the cyclists to help, build in that natural enforcement.
This is from Christine, who noted that the people participating tonight, that 51% of the people used bikes. And she's wondering why that makes it a priority for a bike lane, though we've talked about this isn't a bike lane. Bike lanes are dedicated. This is not a dedicated bike lane. When she's concerned, if we already have one on Dunder and along the water, shouldn't the focus be on something else other than bike lanes right now? And Maureen, maybe this is for you. Shouldn't the focus be on dealing with crime in the neighborhood?
Thank you. Well, the more people actually that we have on our streets, that are walking and cycling and can see your streets, we know it does have an impact on crime. Any eyes on the street make a difference. But that aside, for all the reasons that have been previously articulated, we have a climate emergency. We need to be able to provide, as a city, it's our responsibility to provide safe options. And also for the reason that we are continuously receiving calls from residents worried about the safety of their children, their elderly parents, or themselves in getting around the city and crossing the street. The traffic is just moving too quickly. And this is building on previous commitments that have been made. In addition, we know that more people want a choice in how they move. Economically, cars cost a lot of money, and people would like to pursue other options, whether it be transit or walking or cycling, for a whole bunch of reasons: economic, environmental, social, and health. All cities, not just Hamilton, but I can only speak for Hamilton. This is the reason we are pursuing this.
Chris is asking, why is this not going along Hunt to head up to Strathcona and thereby slowing traffic in front of the school and the park and the seniors home? And he's also worried about the steep hill. So why are you not going down Hunt and over to Head, as currently is quasi-marked?
Well, I think that, I'm assuming you mean, Chris, that like in terms of the Bicycle Boulevard portion of this and why we're not using Hunt, I think that we're looking at both Hunt and also a few other intersections here to see how we can better bring people who are coming off of Locke Street and through the Bicycle Boulevard nearer to the downtown, and bring them through at places like Hunt, which is marked already, but others as well. Like Lamoureux. And so that's not part of this project, but we are looking at that as well in terms of how people are crossing Dunder, which I think is what you're referring to, I guess, is bringing people through and across Dunder. Just
echo what Pete said there. I think, we're not just looking at this, there's other ideas in the way, but this is the priority for our project as described today.
Julie's concerned about the folks that live on Hunt that park in behind their homes, and about the fellow who has the garage on there, that access for them will be choked off, and that they won't be able to access their the rear of their properties. Is there any solutions for those folks, or is that something that you'll take into consideration?
So we have reached out to some of the destinations there, including the cathedral, as well as the garage owner there, to have a discussion, understand their needs and locations there. We do agree that it is a challenge with that short alleyway there, and if there are specific comments and concerns, we'd like that's part of what today is, and the comments that we're trying to get to understand concerns, whether we might move that traffic diverter down or make other adjustments to that area. But we are cognizant of that of the access there, and we would like to hear the feedback and comments if people are actively using their rear alleyways, or if they are using on-street parking to get to make adjustments and refinements to the plan.
Woodbine is too small for bike lanes, cars, and parking. So how will that work in that section?
So Zibby, if you maybe want to go to the typical cross sections. So we're not proposing to add bike lanes onto Woodbine. It would look very similar to what it does today, whereas there's the parking on the one side and the one wider lane. What we'd only be adding is pavement markings for cyclists. From looking at the road, there is space for a car and a cyclist to pass each other. Part of it is, it is a narrower road, and that does create what we call passive friction. So, it is a narrow road, so people feel more tend to go more slowly. So that's part of the intent. We also don't expect this to be a bike boulevard that carries millions of cyclists a day. I would carry a moderate volume, so there would be that good balance to provide the connections and the connectivity, but also avoid a lot of the conflicts that can happen.
Chris is asking, is there potential to allow flow of walkers and cyclists, but cut off automobile traffic completely, like like Shaw in Toronto?
Yep. I can start and maybe Zibby can add in. I know you've worked more with some projects with the City of Toronto. Our traffic diverter, the Shaw Street example, for instance, is they closed off the street completely at the intersection. In our case, we're only looking at closing it for that one-way direction to still provide local residential access, for instance, at Hunt and Breadalbane. So it's partially similar to Shaw Street. As you know, some of the comments we received today, we are cognizant that residents still need to be able to access their home, and doing that directly from some of the other streets may not be desirable.
Have you considered that the other changes will alter the amount of cut-through traffic? I don't quite understand that. I might be reading it incorrectly. Can you see it, Trevor?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. I think the comment might be providing that traffic diverter will mean that, you know, some folks who come down Breadalbane to get to King will now end up in Hunt. I think it is fair that there might be a bit of an education period, but we can put up signage to enforce the fact that, you know, you can't do that cut through anymore as part of the project, to really emphasize that beforehand, to get those vehicles off of Breadalbane and the side streets, and reduce those volumes as is intended.
How much money is allocated for this project?
So we do have some funding through the existing Bike Boulevard budget for the city to do the design and implementation. It's already part of our normal budgeting process, so there'll be no impact. It's just similar to other cycling projects we do across the city.
Could snow clearing be brought to cycling infrastructure standards, occurring more quickly? Will the diverter receive snow clearing despite its tight width?
I can answer that question. And bike lanes are required to be cleared the same way as driving lanes. And that is something that we're working on, making sure that that occurs. With that considered, the diverter, or in between the sidewalk and the diverter, would be cleaned to that same level of service as well.
Thanks. All right, from Ed, on slide 20, Zibby, says people do park in front of Tom Street Park. Is this in fact an illegal parking area?
Yes, so under the city's bylaw, there's no parking allowed on street in front of parks. So this is somewhere where parking and the bylaw enforcement can ticket a vehicle for being parked there.
Can there be a consideration for speed humps to be added along Breadalbane, especially near Tom Park? You may want to show them what you're trying to do at Tom as well.
Yeah. So as part of our other improvements at Tom Park, we are looking towards what's called a realigned or modified intersection. So shown in the bottom right corner, when the curbs would come out, it has benefits to pedestrians because it would shorten the crossing distance if you're crossing Breadalbane, as well as it would slow down. We did do some speed studies, but there weren't significant speeding found. However, we can take that comment back and look at it a bit further if, you know, based off that comment, if there are concerns about speeding in that area.
Okay. Question here. Concern about Woodbine, that the street is not very wide, especially with on-street parking. Is there consideration of turning the Bike Boulevard to the right on Jones and then off to Dunder rather than taking it up Woodbine?
So going across. So that is a good piece of feedback, and we can look into it. I think the reason we are interested in that Woodbine connection is, I think as Peter mentioned before, there is looking towards a project in that area that would provide better connectivity. You know, that little stretch of Dunder from Jones to York is not the most comfortable. It does have higher volumes of traffic. So it is not an ideal place if we are looking towards getting more, creating that all ages and ability cycling network for folks to get more comfortable cycling. You know, York is a bit more buffered with the bike lanes there, but the Dunder and that stretch is a bit narrower and may not be as comfortable for everyone who cycles. Zibby, I don't know, do you have anything else to add to that comment? Or?
Sure. I mean, I can just chime in that I think we've really emphasized that we're not trying to provide separate space for cycling, so vehicles and cyclists would be sharing that space. And so we would probably envision, if it's a narrow section, it would be single file operations. But through our traffic calming interventions, we're trying to create a street where bikes and vehicles would be traveling at roughly the same speed anyway. So that will help with some of that sort of negotiating and sharing of space.
All right, I think we're getting into comments now, which all the comments will be recorded. So our speed limit's going to drop.
Yep. So I can start the question, then maybe I'll hand it over to Mike Field. So as part of the city's Vision Zero, there is a neighborhood speed reduction pilot or program underway. And I believe Strathcona is slated for 2022. So maybe I'll hand it to Mike to speak a bit more about that.
Part of the neighborhood speed reduction program is that all neighborhoods across the city, the speed limits are being lowered to 40 kilometers an hour and the 30 kilometers an hour within school zones. So this neighborhood is earmarked for that. And as Trevor kind of noted, that happening within 2022 next year.
Then is there a possibility of having speed bumps on the street for calming purposes?
So I can start, maybe hand it over to Mike if he has any additional comments. We can look into that. I think one of the concerns is making sure they're the right size so we don't impact street parking at all or loss of spaces on the streets. But it's something we can look into based off, it has come up in a couple of comments, so we can look into that.
Okay, Monica's asking, with bump outs, how many parking spots will be lost?
So the plan with the bump outs is they would only be limited to the space it's not legal to park in already. So there'd be no loss of parking in that section. The only place we anticipate a lost parking spot would be where the traffic diverter is south of Hunt, where we anticipate one lost parking spot, but everywhere else, all legal parking will remain.
How long is this pilot proposed and intended to run for? He feels that there's lots of pilots that are too short or miss seasonal changes.
Yep. So we'd intend to cover at least 2 of the major cycling seasons. And as I mentioned, as part of the monitoring, doing kind of follow-up or survey beforehand, 6 months after, a year after, and 2 years after, to understand changes and things like that, to try to get more of a full set of data. So that's what we're looking at towards for the pilot program. And as mentioned, kind of using that mix of permanent and flexible materials.
All right, I guess there are people parking illegally now, and they're concerned that they won't be able to continue parking illegally. Again, we'll take that into consideration, though you're parking legally. Would a local traffic only sign be included if you're looking at a greenway in order to reduce, again, let folks know this isn't a place to try to cut through?
Yep, I can start. Kind of the first portion, maybe hand it over to Mike to talk about the effectiveness of the local traffic only. Probably what we would do here, instead of having a local traffic, is just signs that say no access to King Street via Breadalbane or something like that, just to really drive home that point. I'm not sure if Mike can speak to the effectiveness of local traffic only signs in other places or his experience with them.
We don't use that signage except for road closures, temporary road closures, that sort of thing. And I think your comment about the signs indicating no through traffic are more effective.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Really appreciate your excellent questions, great attendance. And as Stephanie noted, please do not hesitate to send along your comments, your concerns, any additional information that you think would help us moving forward. I think Trevor gave a date of October the 8th. And if for some reason you're not able to find those emails, you can always email us at ward1@hamilton.ca, and we'll ensure that the questions, comments, concerns are answered and directed accordingly. So thank you all very much. And please, again, if your neighbors missed the session, they'll be able to catch it on YouTube. Thank you to staff for joining us and for your service this evening. Be safe, everyone.